What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Over Analysis. Today we're continuing our series going over the best and worst ADPs in every round of the draft. Today we're talking about the guys in round 12. So currently being drafted in round 12, we have Tyler Allgeier, Jared Goff, Hunter Henry, Rashid Shaheed, Brian Robinson Jr., Keaton Mitchell, Tyjae Spears, Kyler Murray, Chig Okonkwo, Kenyon Sadiq, Brenton Strange, and Alvin Kamara. Coming in at the 1201, we have Tyler Allgeier of the Arizona Cardinals. So Tyler Allgeier, throughout his career, even though he's primarily been a backup to Bijan Robinson, has always been a guy that is somewhat startable as a low-end desperation flex play. Allgeier has routinely finished as a high-end RB4, low-end RB3. And Allgeier is probably good enough to be a starting running back in the NFL. In fact, a lot of people thought that that was what was going to happen to him after signing with the Arizona Cardinals. But the Cardinals had other plans. They go out and use their first-round pick on Jeremiah Love. So now Allgeier is once again in a very similar situation to what he was in with the Atlanta Falcons through his entire career. And it sounds like to start the season, Allgeier could actually have a pretty decent rollout. Jeremiah Love has been injured in training camp. He's battling a high ankle sprain. And also, as a rookie running back, it was always going to take some time before he fully understands all the nuances of an NFL offense. And now that Love is battling a high ankle sprain, that's the type of injury that could limit him all year, especially in a season where, again, the Cardinals are expected to be a bad team. They're going to be playing for a 2027 draft pick at the end of the season. So if Love is still bothered by this ankle injury deep into the season, then there's not going to be a lot of incentive for the Cardinals to put him out there, give him a full workload, and risk doing more damage to a guy that they're invested in for their future. So I think there's definitely a path here for Tyler Allgeier to be a lot more valuable in fantasy this year than a lot of people are expecting him to be. And while he's not a guy that I'm necessarily going to go out of my way to get, if we get to this point in the draft and I already have my running back and receiver position settled, and I have both my late round quarterback and late round tight end locked up, then he's a guy that I would definitely give some consideration to at this point. Coming in at the 1202, we have Jared Goff, and Jared Goff is one of my primary late round quarterback targets. He's one of my favorite picks to make in this stage of the draft. And Goff being drafted as the QB16, I just feel like is a guy that never gets any appreciation from the fantasy football community. For a guy that's being drafted this low, he's a guy that's also routinely just delivered as a QB1 and has easily outperformed this ADP year after year. The last 4 seasons alone, Jared Goff has been the QB10, the QB4, the QB9, and the QB6. He's averaged over 4,500 passing yards per year during that stretch. He's also averaged well over 30 touchdown passes. He's also tied to one of the most explosive offenses in the league, and he has an elite group of skill positions for him to work with. And none of that's changed. He still has Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta. And on top of that, the Lions also have a bad defense, so you have all the ingredients you need for all these high-scoring affairs where there's plenty of opportunity for Goff to throw for over 300 yards and multiple scores. So you have all these great factors working in Jared Goff's favor that are conducive to him way outperforming this ADP and finishing inside the QB1 ranks, and yet people, for whatever reason, just don't want to make Goff a priority. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he is a zero in the rushing game. But when your quarterback is a lock to throw for over 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns, automatically that's a recipe to put him in the top 12 easily. So Goff is just my favorite late round quarterback to go after. And also, it's very possible to get a great stack with him and Amon-Ra St. Brown if you go for St. Brown in the first round. So again, Jared Goff, I think is just a fantastic pick in this range. I love loading up on running back and wide receiver within the first 10 rounds and then going for tight end and quarterback in the double-digit rounds. Goff is usually the quarterback I end up coming away with in most of my team builds. At the 1203, we have Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots, and Henry, not a guy that I have a lot of interest in. Henry does finish as the tight end 9 last year with over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. But his upside and his ceiling is going to take a significant hit with the arrival of both A.J. Brown, and even a guy like Romeo Doubs is going to take some of those red zone looks away from him. And Henry's value is so dependent on him being able to be a primary red zone weapon for the Patriots, and if you've added multiple guys here that are going to take that red zone share away from him, then I just don't know what the appeal here is. I'd much rather be drafting either Chig Okonkwo or Brenton Strange at this point in the draft. At the 12:04, we have Rashid Shaheed of the Seattle Seahawks. Shaheed entering his first full season with Seattle. I think there's definitely potential here for an expanded role on what he was able to do in his first half of a season with the team. Shaheed had already shown some good chemistry with Sam Darnold, and it's also great for him that he plays opposite a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba. You know, defenses are going to need to put the majority of their attention on a guy like JSN, which is going to make it a lot easier for a deep threat like Shaheed to get a lot of one-on-one looks on the outside. It all adds up to Shaheed being a really nice value at this point in the draft. I think he's very comparable to what Jameson Williams was early in his career, a guy that's very boom or bust, but the weeks that he booms could potentially swing you a fantasy matchup. Now that being said, the bust element of Shaheed's game does make him a little tough to trust in traditional leagues where you're only starting 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, but in leagues where you are starting potentially 3 receivers or in multiple flexes, I think Shaheed is a worthwhile flyer at this point in the draft. At the 12:05, we have Brian Robinson Jr. of the Atlanta Falcons. And there's not really a lot to say here. I don't have interest in Brian Robinson at all. He's a running back 2 behind Bijan Robinson, and there's not going to be enough touches for him to return much value. Tyler Allgeier, in a best-case scenario, was a high-end RB4, low-end RB3, and it was very difficult to predict the weeks that he was startable. And that was a best-case scenario outcome for Tyler Allgeier. Now, for Brian Robinson, he's not as good of a player as Tyler Allgeier, so I don't think he's going to command nearly the same role that Allgeier had. So again, there's no reason to be taking a flyer on Brian Robinson at this point. He needs a Bijan injury to have any kind of fantasy relevance. Otherwise, there are just better picks in this range, plain and simple. Now, a running back that you do want to be drafting in this range is Keaton Mitchell of the Chargers. Mitchell, a very explosive running back during his time in Baltimore, now joins a Mike McDaniel offense that is very fantasy friendly and has also shown an ability to support 2 fantasy RB1s in the past. Think back to how Devon Achane was used by McDaniel in his rookie year. Achane was such an explosive guy, he really only needed a handful of touches to return an RB1 performance. If Keaton Mitchell is getting 8 to 10 touches a game, he's a threat to take the ball to the house on any given play. Especially if he's getting a decent amount of the receiving work out of the backfield, then that's going to give him such a nice floor on those 8 to 10 touches as well. So you have a super explosive guy in Mitchell that is 100% going to have a role for himself in this backfield that's going to have some kind of standalone value, but you also have the contingent RB1 upside for Mitchell if Omarion Hampton were to go down with an injury like he did last season. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about Keaton Mitchell at this point in the draft. I think he's a guy that absolutely carries potential league-winning upside with him in the 12th round. A guy who does not carry league-winning upside is Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans, currently being drafted at the 12:07. Spears is one of these guys that the fantasy football community has just overrated and overhyped year after year. They keep desperately trying to make Tyjae Spears into a thing, and it just never happens. He's a low-end RB3, high-end RB4 type, and as long as Tony Pollard's there, the ceiling is just going to be capped for Tyjae Spears. But even if Pollard were to get traded or go down with an injury, you still have issues with Spears when it comes to durability, and it's also still going to be a bad offense with a young quarterback that's trying to learn. So there's no reason to be drafting Tyjae Spears at this point. He's just a name that has appeal to owners that are drafting him as a post-hype sleeper that just can't give up on the idea of him being a thing, even though it hasn't worked out for Spears for several years now. At the 12:08, we have Kyler Murray of the Minnesota Vikings. Murray getting an opportunity to be the starting quarterback for Kevin O'Connell after flaming out in Arizona. And the Kevin O'Connell offense is a very fantasy-friendly one. The only quarterback that has not been able to succeed in this offense has been J.J. McCarthy. Now, Kyler Murray himself has been very frustrating from a fantasy perspective throughout his career. He has just one QB1 finish to his name over the last 4 seasons when he finished as the QB10 in 2024. He has not thrown for more than 26 touchdown passes at any point in his NFL career, and he has not thrown for more than 25 since his 2nd season. And it's not like the Cardinals ever shortchanged Murray in terms of weapons. They had DeAndre Hopkins in his prime, they had Trey McBride, they spent a first-round pick on Marvin Harrison, even though he himself looks like a bust. And they also drafted Michael Wilson as well, who didn't break out until after Kyler Murray was removed from the starting lineup. So even though Murray's going over to a spot where he's got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Juwan Jennings to throw to in a fantasy-friendly system, I don't think that it's a lock that he succeeds here. Also, during the training camp battle with J.J. McCarthy, it's not like Murray was getting any kind of rave reviews. When Murray was finally named the starting quarterback, Kevin O'Connell kind of gave him a little bit of lukewarm praise, saying that Murray had quote-unquote shown enough to be the starter. So while Murray's a trendy late-round quarterback pick, it's not really a guy that I go after. Again, I much prefer the safety of a guy like Jared Goff, and I've seen enough frustrating and bad Kyler Murray play over the years that I just don't want to attach myself to that train. And then at the 12:09, you have Chig Okonkwo of the Commanders, one of my favorite late-round tight end targets. And this is going to be a far better situation for Okonkwo. He was stuck for years in a bad offense in Tennessee. This year he's going to play with an elite quarterback in Jaden Daniels and an offensive coordinator in David Blau that's going to utilize him a lot better. Okonkwo himself has said several times that he's excited to be running quote-unquote actual routes from the tight end position. And this tight end role for Jaden Daniels has been a valuable one. In his rookie season, Daniels helped Zach Ertz, towards the tail end of his career, finish as the tight end 7. And while yes, the value does take a bit of a hit now that Stephon Diggs is here, I still think the opportunity is there for Okonkwo to get a sizable chunk of this target share. So I absolutely love Okonkwo as a late-round tight end target. I love pairing him with Isaiah Likely, or I love going for Okonkwo first and going for a guy like A.J. Barner even later into the draft. But again, Okonkwo in the 12th round is just an absolute standout value to me at the tight end position. At the 12:10 and the 12:11, you have two more late-round tight end options, Kenyon Sadiq and Brenton Strange. With Sadiq, yes, he was a first-round pick, but it's a bad offense, it's a bad situation, and again, he's coming off of a hernia injury that's cost him most of training camp. He is expected to be back by week 1, but again, the situation's just bad here, and I don't think he has that high of a ceiling for his first year in the league. And with Brenton Strange, while he's a guy that's in a better offense, it's also a crowded offense in Jacksonville. There's guys like Brian Thomas, Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, Travis Hunter, that all are going to need a certain amount of targets per week. So it's hard to imagine that you feel good about the floor for Brenton Strange on any given week. It's going to be very hard to predict when his spikes are going to be. So neither one of these tight ends are going to be of much use for me in fantasy this year. Again, I think Chig Okonkwo in this range is just a far superior option. And then the final pick in this round, Alvin Kamara. Not a guy that you're going to have interest in. Kamara is a guy that's looked like he's been dust for the last couple of seasons. And now with Travis Etienne there, at best it's going to be a split for Kamara. And while Kamara would still be receiving some of the high value touches out of the receiving game, it's not going to be enough that you're going to feel good about rolling him out in your lineup on any given week. That's going to do it for this one, guys. So in round 12, there's definitely a lot of upside on the table here still. Again, I absolutely love Jared Goff as one of my late-round quarterback targets, and there's a ton of upside to be had with guys like Chig Okonkwo at the tight end position, and Keaton Mitchell and Rashid Shaheed at the running back and wide receiver spots. And in this range of the draft, it's all about knowing where the value is versus avoiding guys that are just obvious bad picks, like the Brian Robinson Jr. tiers or Alvin Kamara's that are going in this stage. That's going to do it for this one though, guys. I thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I will talk to you next time where we go through the final rounds of the draft, rounds 13 through 16, and go over any remaining gems left on the board at that point.